Check out these forks. I did these, I cut them last September, so it's been 5-6 months or so, but you can see how they're nice and dry now. The reason I let them sit down in the basement for so long, usually 3 to 5 months, is it dries them out. And now I can go ahead and show you how I turn them into slingshot. After I've allowed my slingshot forks to dry, I'll take a look at it and I'll find where the slingshot is. And it's about here and it's about here. Let's see if you can see that. There's the forks. That's how long. Usually you want them just an inch beyond your hand in the grip. So I'd cut it about here. And at the top here, you want it about 2.5 to 2.25 inches. Right about there. So I'll set this down here and grab my saw and just eyeball it and saw the forks and the grip to length. There we go. Now I'll quickly, you can see that, that's the length. Now I'll quickly do the rest of the sawing and then continue on. Now you can see a nifty little slingshot has taken shape. See that? Hold on to it. Fork length is going to be just right. The grip has a little extra at the bottom. I could probably take a little more off that, but I'm not going to. And now we have to get the knife out. So now the real fun begins. Here's our slingshot fork. It's got little knobs sticking out of it that will have to go. You need a sharp knife. I've got all kinds of knives I use for carving. This is a Mora clipper. It'll work just fine. Look out, Tippy. But the most important thing to say here is you should protect your hands. Always protect your hands when you're working with knives. Put these on quick and show you. Here's a pair of cut-resistant gloves. These are level A2. And when I bought them, they showed them as A4s, and they sent me A2. But they fit so nice, and they have such good dexterity, and the cut risk is low. So they work fine. I use them. If I was to replace them, I'd get like A3, just a little bit thicker glove. But you're always cutting away from your hands. Always, when you're carving, you're always going away, no matter how you carve. Never carve toward yourself, and you'll be just fine. But if you have that one mental error and it slips, it's good to have some type of cut resistance on your hands. I have really sharp knives, so it's more important than ever. Yesterday afternoon, spring came about. And today, about 15 to 20 minutes ago, we hit 50 degrees here in southern Minnesota for the first time since last year. So I came outside, and I'm not going to carve this whole thing with a camera here, but I took a knife, in this case the Mora clipper, and this is the fun part now. I usually do this in the house and then just sweep up the shavings, but this is buckthorn, this wood, and I'm going to just slowly carve away, always carving away from me until I get the entire slingshot carved down. It takes 15 minutes, and then I will also deal with these knots here, these where you had a little branch, these nubs. I'll get rid of those too. But this is how I start. So I'm going to shut the camera off now and just continue to carve for the next 15 or so minutes. Okay, it's been about 15 minutes, and this is what I ended up with. Let me get this in the camera. It's hard for me to see out here. You can see I carved away. I cut around the edges of the base, and all around the fork tips I chamfered them with the knife. Now I'll do the same thing with this flat file or flat rasp. Let me see if I hope this shows up. I'll take it like this, and I'll set it down though. I won't hold it in the air like this. I'll go all the way around the edges until that's nice and smoothed out. I'll do it to both tips. I'll rasp away on both tips. It'll take about 2 or 3 minutes with it properly held in place, held down. Then I'll do the base. all the way around until that's done. When that's done, I'll take the heavy rasp like this, and I'll begin rasping away these little nubs that are sticking out. You can see those nubs. And again, I won't be holding it in the air. I'll have it down on the, held solidly down on the bench, and I'll just rasp away. Real quickly, I hope this shows up. So this is how I'm doing it right now. Now I'm switching over to a thin and easy to, or a fine rasp. I'm rasping the edges. You see how I'm rounding these off? I've been working at it for 5 minutes already. When you get to a big nub, like this, knot sticking out, folks, I lost camera power, so I had to recharge my battery. But as you can see, I went over this with the file, and I filed those ends rounded, the tips, the fork tips, and I filed the bottom. I cut a little bit off this one to make it more in proportion. The next thing we have to do is we have to put in string grooves, band tie grooves here and here, right on the fork tips, on both sides, down about a ½ an inch or less. So I'll quickly do that. I'll just show you that real fast. Wait a minute, let's pull this back. Push it, let's try it right here. Okay, we're going to put in grooves. Hopefully you can see that. Hopefully my hand isn't in the way. Later on I'll clean up this file. They don't have to be very deep. There, see those little grooves, notches I made? And then do it on the other side. As you can see here, now we've got little notches. And you'll see later how they come into play. But the next thing we do is sanding. And that could take 10 minutes on a slingshot like this one, and maybe less. When it comes to time to sand, I like to use a sanding sponge. Like this one. This is kind of worn out. I have to get a new one. Move this over a little bit. But you just take it and start rough sanding. It can be like 150 grit, 200 grit's fine, and then you can finish up with like a 300 grit. Because you want to go over the ends, the tips, real nicely. Get those tips all sanded down. You want to go in between the forks, real good. And you can't. It has to be perfectly smooth when it's done. There can't be any sharp edges anywhere on the slingshot, or you could cut the bands. But you get the drift. I'll just show you this now. Do a real quick job of it. You can see how you can spend as much time as you want really making it look good. Earlier I said that this was buckthorn. As soon as I began to cut it, I knew instantly it wasn't buckthorn. I don't know what I was thinking. It's been a long time since I made a buckthorn slingshot, I suppose. And it's choke cherry. I don't cut choke cherry forks because I make choke cherry jam. I never cut their forks. So that means I found this fork in a pile of cuttings. Whoa. That the city did. The city goes along and cuts all the choke cherry down and the buckthorn and everything else along the bike trails. Then I go out and look through it and I grab forks. But you get the idea. I'll go off camera now and finish up the sanding. I've gone over this slingshot for 10 minutes with sandpaper. And you can see the ends are nice and smooth. They have to be nice and smooth. The bottom's nice and smooth. The edges. It's got a little bump right here in the back side, but that's going to be all right. I can remove that, but it feels great. As you can see, when you choke up on it, somebody with a bigger hand too can choke up and still have room at the end here. As you can see, it's going to be just perfect. So the next thing to do is going to be, you could stain it, but I like to keep it natural. So the next thing I'm going to do now is put boiled linseed oil on it. And I'll do that in the house, down the basement. Now we're going to put some boiled linseed oil on this. This is a paper towel. And I always use a rag, so I never use a paper towel. This is the first time I've used one. It was just sitting here, so I grabbed it and decided to use it. But as you can see, what the linseed oil does is it hardens the surface, and it starts to bring out a little bit of color. This isn't the most colorful slingshot I've ever done, that's for sure. Like I said, I called it buckthorn, and it's chokecherry, and chokecherry is a very whitish kind of. It does get a little bit orangish or brownish, not that much. You can see some white spots on there, but overall it's not looking bad. So what you do is by putting on the boiled linseed oil, you're just kind of sealing up. You're not really sealing it at all. You're just kind of hardening the finish. Let me just quickly put on one more coat. Here's what the can looks like. There, boiled linseed oil. Bad shape. I notice these paper towels I'm using don't really shed debris, so they're not bad. But you put them on, put this on, get it in the little grooves that you cut. Get all down the handle. So this will harden your surface. Now the problem with this kind of a finish is it doesn't matter how many coats you put on, it will not protect you from splinters. When your hands get sweaty in the summertime, there we go. When your hands get sweaty in the summertime, splinters can rise up and get you. And then you're sitting there trying to pick a splinter out when you want to shoot. And so what we're going to do next is put a clear coat, 2 or 3 coats of clear over this. I usually use gloss, but all I've got is matte, so I'll just use matte on this one. But then later on I'll put a few coats of gloss over the matte. And it looks nice, but what it really does is it puts an enamel coating on the outside, and that eliminates splinters. So there you have it. You can see all we did here is we kind of brought out the color in our slingshot. So that's kind of cool. A cold front came through and lowered temperatures so much that I just went out last night and put about 3 coats on the slingshot of clear coat. And all that does, the reason you have to do that is to keep you, and then I'll go over it lightly with 1500 grit sandpaper. It keeps you from getting splinters. I just grabbed this clear right here, Rust-Oleum clear gloss. If I was painting clear coating white, I would have used crystal clear. What I'm going to do now, folks, is show you how I make bands for our slingshot. Got the slingshot ready to go. I took a 9-inch piece of TheraBand Gold. You can use whatever band material you like. I like TheraBand due to its consistency. And the first thing I do is I measure the tips of my slingshot. On the smallest tip, it's just over a 5/8 inch band will fit this slingshot perfect. So I set a ruler here and I mark it 5/8 inch. And on the other side of the 9-inch piece, we're going to taper it from 5/8 to about 3/8. That would be a good taper. And now I will, over here on this side, we'll go 5/8 again, right here. And over on this side, 3/8. And now I'm going to cut out. Forget it, Taz, you're not eating till later. Taz is screaming at me to eat. Then I'll set any kind of a straight edge. I prefer steel, but I'm going to use this one. Then you're going to need, if you can get a cutting board, that's great to have. Then you can use this wheel cutter. Otherwise, you can just use the scissors if you don't want to invest in a cutting board and a wheel cutter. It has to be a sharp scissors, but you can use that. Okay, we'll cut it down. Didn't do a perfect job, but I'll carefully go over it. There we go. Okay, there we go. Now we're gonna be very careful about this. Now we have our bands. Our bands. I cut them to 9 inches. You can cut them whatever length you want, but to start, go with about 9. We're going to need ties to tie these bands to the forks. So I went down the basement and I grabbed an old bicycle inner tube and I cut 2 12 to 14, these will be 14-inch strips of inner tube rubber. It's fantastic stuff. About a little over 1/8 of an inch wide. 1/8 of an inch or a little wider is all you need. So now we've got our bands ready and we got our band ties done. Now we need a pouch. I reshot this section of the video after finishing the video. I explained how I make pouches, but what I didn't show you was, I didn't show how I make them, I should say. So here's the template I use when I'm doing a small band. And I'll draw about 20 of these and the larger template too, and do like 20 at a time. But for this video, I'm just going to do one. And I draw the outline on calf skin. And you may say, well, where am I going to get calf skin? Check eBay, that's where I got mine. And then once I've drawn it on here, now I'm going to cut that out. Now, I just cut it out. Here it is. This is going to be our pouch. Now I'm going to take it outside and show you how I finish it. Alright, you take here's the pouch, find any old board, and then I take a 5mm punch for small pouches and a 6mm for larger pouches and larger bands. You want the small, you don't want a big holes on the ends because your ammo can actually bounce off the hole if it's too big. And you just align it wherever it looks about 1/8 of an inch from the edge and hit the punch with a hammer a couple times and it pops it right through. It doesn't have to be perfect. This one probably isn't perfect. There you have it. There's your pouch, all ready to go. Again, you can get these on eBay cheap, and probably $10 or less for $10 ship for a whole big set. And use the 5mm for small pouches. Use like a 6mm for something larger, and you're ready to go. So hopefully that explains how I make my pouches. So now we've got the pouches, our pouch, our line ties, our band ties, and our bands. Now we need to tie these pouches to the bands, or tie the pouch to the bands. And I bought this little pouch tying jig for $10 on eBay. You don't have to use this. There are ways where you can take a band. I always use the TheraBand gold printed side as the inside of the band. And so you can take that, have it on the bottom, and you want your narrow side. You want to have the narrow side at the pouch. That's weaker, and if it when the pouch or when the bands break after around 600 shots, 625 shots, the band will fly away from your face. That's another reason that the taper also adds speed. But you put it in the hole here and you push it through about a 1/2 inch. Now you can fold this over and glue it on both sides with super glue and squeeze it together if you don't have a jig to tie. But I prefer to use a thread and tie on my pouches. For thread, I use blue or this red pure silk rod wrapping thread. Makes for a fabulous little colorful tie-on. I'm the only person that I've known to ever use pure silk to tie on the pouches, but you might want to consider it. And one little spool will last you for 1,000 or more slingshots. Thousands probably. And then after I tie it, I'll put a drop of any kind of super glue. This gel isn't actually the best, but that's what I've got, so that's what I'll use. Put a drop of super glue on the ties and they stay in place. Alright, now I'm going to show you how I use this little jig. Alright, we take our pouch, we take our band, we find ThoroughBand Gold where it's printed, have that on the bottom, fold the pouch over like this, and you go in through the bottom of the band, like this. We're going to pull it through about like this, flip it over, stick it on this little pin here, pull it here, and then this will hold it in place. Now you can see we've stretched it out, the band out. It's just perfect. Now we'll take our thread, take about a foot or so of thread, and I'm going to begin wrapping it. Whoa. This jig is really handy for 10 bucks. There you go. And I make just a nice tight little wrap, and when the bands do eventually break, they'll break 1/4 inch in front of this wrap on one side or the other every time. You know, the band will fly away from your face. You won't have to worry about getting slapped in the face. Okay, after we've wrapped it around sufficiently and have a nice little deal, now I'm going to put a drop of super glue. I'm going to shut my camera off for a second to get the super glue going. I've now put a drop of glue on the tie. And then I just put my finger here, I push up on the band as I pull this arm back. Flies right off. Now we have a nice little tie. Beautiful little tie. And then I'll let that dry. Or I'll just, in a few minutes, like 2 minutes, I'll do the other side. And then cut away the excess thread. I waited about 20 minutes for the super glue to start drying. And now I'm going to snip the tag ends off, being careful not to snip the bands. If you touch the band with the scissors, you ruined your bands. There we go. And then I look, the little tag ends, being very careful here. Cut them off of the thread to make it look a little cleaner. Pull on them. Straighten them out. There's your nice little wraps. I could have done a better job. I rushed it. But it's okay. Now we're ready to tie them to the slingshot. So here's our slingshot. We hold on to it. It feels best held this way. If you're a right-handed shooter, you hold in your left hand. So I start. Again, we want the printed side of the rubber to be on the inside. So we want to put that downward like this. And here's where these grooves that I made here and on the back come in. Set this over the groove. Set it down about 1 inch. You take your line tie or your band tie and start wrapping it around like this. It'll sit inside the groove. This is kind of hard for me to do it with it straight out in front of me like this. Normally I would have it downward, but just wrap it around. You don't have to have these ties as long as I make them, but I put a lot of rubber there because then it's never going to come loose. On the last wrap, go over your index finger, take the tag in, and tuck it under like that, and just there we go. You can straighten it out a little bit. I'll do that in a minute. But there, and then you just clip off. And I'll straighten all this in the back out. But clip your excess off, and you have a a tie there that's not going to come loose. And if you do get a fork hit, which rarely happens with these slingshots, it nearly always will bounce off of the rubber and protect the slingshot. Now you can see it's pretty much done. Now I'll do the other side. You can see we now have a finished slingshot. I've now got it, it's now ready to try out, test out. But I will take it off camera here for a second. I'm going to sign and date it. There you go. Have my name on there and 325, see if, there, 32523. So now you know when you made that slingshot. That's kind of fun. Now we have to take it outside and shoot, because a slingshot is no good if you're not shooting it. Alrighty, time to shoot. I just can't shoot now. I got to shut the camera off again. I've had to shut it off several times because of the cats, till they get out of the way. I cleared out all cats, and now I'll show you how the successor to Rufus Hussey hits a pop cat. There we go. I got it. That's how it's done, folks. She's a shooter. She is a shooter. That was a full can of A&W Diet. I don't drink Diet Pop, and it's been in the refrigerator for 2 years. Hopefully this video will show you how to make a slingshot. And the big thing is to get out now and make one and shoot them. They're better shooting and a little quieter than plastic or metal slingshots. And they won't slap you in the hand. And if they break, when they break, they always break within a 1/4 inch of the line tie. And the bands will fly away from your face. These will never come loose. These little wraps here are set to stay right exactly where. The only way to get these wraps loose is to pull them free. Long after the bands break and are ready to be retied, these bands, you just have to undo these bands just to take the old ones off to retie them. They're not going to come loose. And that's what I like about this. And like I said, if you do get a fork hit, you're protected. So for now, I'm going to set that can back up and take a few more shots and call it a day. Thanks for your time. This is something interesting about the can. It hit right here and came out right there. Look at that hole. So pretty good power for such small bands.